world had a way of closing doors on Daniel Grayson. When he came back from his last deployment, he imagined things would be different, that the medals pinned to his chest, the service, the sacrifice, it would all mean something. But now, standing on the cold sidewalk, staring at the eviction notice taped to his apartment door, he realized the world had already forgotten him. He had nowhere left to go. He stuffed the last of his belongings into a ragged duffel bag, an old army jacket, a few faded t-shirts, and the one thing he still had faith in, a worn photograph of his daughter, Emily. She was 6 the last time he saw her, smiling on a carousel at the county fair. The divorce papers had come soon after his return, with no hard feelings, just a quiet understanding that he wasn't the same man who had left. His ex-wife had moved on, and Emily had grown without him. Daniel shuffled down the streets of the city, clutching his duffel bag and the photo like a lifeline. He tried calling his old army buddies, no answer. He texted his sister, but the message sat unread for days. He even swallowed his pride and called the VA for assistance. "Thank you for your service. Due to high call volumes, please hold." He held. For hours, until his phone battery died. Nights were the worst. He found himself under an overpass, curled against the concrete wall, listening to the distant hum of traffic and the muffled conversations of other lost souls nearby. The cold seeped into his bones like a sickness, and he pressed the photo of Emily against his chest, willing it to bring him warmth. He wasn't alone under the bridge, but the others didn't speak much. They had hollow eyes, distant stares, the same stories told in different ways. He met a man named Carl who had been there for years, and a woman named Martha who mumbled to herself about a son she hadn't seen in a decade. "They don't come back," she told him one night, staring at the sky. "Once they leave, they don't look back." Daniel wanted to tell her she was wrong, but he wasn't so sure. The days blurred together. He wandered the city, trying to find work, something, anything to scrape by. No one wanted to hire a man who hadn't held a job in years, who flinched at loud noises, whose hands shook when he tried to fill out an application. "Sorry, man," they'd say, not unkindly. "We'll let you know." But they never did. One day, Daniel made his way to the assistant's office downtown, hoping, praying that someone might finally help him. The waiting room smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Rows of chairs filled with people just like him, waiting for their number to be called. When it was finally his turn, he sat across from a woman with tired eyes and a tight smile. She clicked her pen and asked all the usual questions. "Do you have a place to stay?" "No." "Family that can assist?" "No." She nodded, scribbling something down. "It might take a few weeks to process your application." "Weeks?" Daniel's voice cracked. She sighed, her smile fading. "I'm sorry, we're overwhelmed, but we'll get you something." He left without hope. That night, it snowed. Daniel sat beneath the overpass, shivering, his breath visible in the freezing air. He held the photo of Emily between his fingers, tracing the edges, his eyes burning. "I'll see you soon, sweetheart," he whispered, just a little longer. His fingers grew numb, the cold pressing in, seeping through his bones. And at some point, as the cars roared overhead and the snow piled around him, he closed his eyes. Morning came. The city bustled, pedestrians walked by without looking. A street sweeper making his rounds spotted something beneath the bridge. At first he thought it was just another homeless man, bundled up in rags. But as he got closer he realized the man wasn't moving. Frozen, curled against the concrete, his face peaceful, his hands clutching a faded photograph of a little girl on a carousel. The news barely covered it. Another homeless vet, another statistic. The shelter director gave a short statement about the importance of supporting those who served. A local reporter covered it in the back pages of the newspaper. And then, silence. Daniel Grayson, who once fought wars on foreign soil, was buried in a simple, unmarked grave. No one claimed the body. No one spoke his name. Months later, Emily's mother sat at the kitchen table, sifting through unopened mail. A small envelope, yellowed and bent, caught her eye. It was a letter from the city. "We regret to inform you." Her hands shook as she read the words, and when she called Emily into the room, her voice cracked. Emily held the letter, reading it slowly, her eyes welling up with tears. She hadn't seen him in years, hadn't even thought about him in so long. Now it was too late. She sat on her bed that night, the letter in one hand, an old carousel photo in the other. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. And outside the window, the snow fell silently, covering the streets where he had once walked.